So I'm really grateful to be here. Some people know some of the things that I've dealt with over the past 6 years. As Steve mentioned, I am not particularly private, especially at night when my self-control is not that good. So I wind up venting to Twitter quite a bit. But I'm a pretty quiet person in real life, and I actually don't volunteer a bunch. I've talked with a lot of you. You may notice I ask more questions than I actually volunteer, unless we're talking about my dog. But this is really going to be the first time I am talking about publicly about what the last 6 years have taught me about being a better technologist, a better colleague, and a better me. This is something that I do for all talks now. If you would like to read along with the talk, see the slides more closely, this is a Google Doc with the preliminary transcript, and I'll eventually put the slides online in a more permanent format. Okay, so this is how you know it's going to be an interesting talk. I'm going to put some content warnings up here. So I'm going to talk about ordeals that I went through with chronic illness and medical and psychological trauma. I want to tell you this because I want to give you the option to opt out. It's not going to offend me if you decide to sit this talk out. And it's going to be hard to hear. So the next slide will not get into that, but so you'll have like a slide's worth of time to exit the room. So again, I'm Julia. Hi. I do various things at Google. I've done everything from engineering to developer advocacy. Right now I'm being a TPM, a technical program manager. And my work is to make open source a happier, healthier, more sustainable place. But I used to work in compliance, so please don't ask me about licenses. I'm really tired of talking about licenses. So, so this used to be me. I was an internationally unrecognizable spy, getting glamour shots taken while crawling around in a suspiciously carpeted air duct. And I was able to do really advanced things, like bending with impunity, carrying heavy bags, which you can't really see in this photo, but I promise it's there, and putting weight on my wrists. That was like, wow, those are really advanced skills. This is actually from the International Spy Museum in DC. It's fun. Recommend it. But this is who I am now. And here I am lying on the couch with an ice pack strategically placed behind my head because I thought that my brain was going to actually fall out of my skull, despite the impossibilities of that actually happening. I usually describe myself as the walking embodiment of Murphy's Law, or a biological system that's experiencing cascading failures. And there's been a lot of doctors trying to figure out what's going on, and while we've ruled out a bunch of different things, I am still a legit medical mystery. I am at the point where I'm actually going to be throwing machine learning at it, so we'll see how that goes. But we do know one thing, and that's that a lot of my issues are due to this jackass. So this is MRI, a video I made from MRI data, and it's looking at my spine from top down. And that little white, bright white circle there that appears and disappears is what's known as a syrinx. And that's a cyst in your spinal column that's filled with cerebral spinal fluid. It tends to compress the nerves where it is, obviously, and it can actually destroy them. It is rare, but people with a large enough syrinx can actually become paralyzed due to this particular issue. So, kind kind of drastically simplifying things, my body being itself means that I'm in constant pain from my back, from my head, from my joints kind of slipping in and out of place. I got my shoulder back into the right place last night, and it popped a rib out of place, so that's fun. I also can't see very well, which I'm pretty public about. And I don't feel pain in certain parts of my body, but I don't get to choose which ones they are, unfortunately. I'd probably choose my head. And I've tried, like, over the years to fix things. I've had a lot of surgery. And some of it has been to try and fix the spine, the brain, the vision issues. But not only did they leave me in just as bad of a state or worse as I had been beforehand, they were really traumatic. They really should tell you when they're going to wake you up during surgery, because I remember that shit. It's not fun. But my medical team also ghosted me. How many people have been ghosted by a date? Okay, imagine it's someone that's like actually supposed to provide you with post-op care. Yeah. They refused to return my calls. They actually canceled my post-op appointment. They wouldn't return my calls for 3 to 4 months. So that was super fun. It's a really heavy thing when you get the message that your life doesn't matter to the people that are tasked with literally saving lives. So I was like nowhere. I was basically in limbo. I was on leave from work, and all I wanted to do was resume a normal life. And I was on like I had a pretty good life beforehand. It was really awesome. So after 6 months, I went back to work because it was one of the few things in my life that actually seemed solid, right? Everything else was quicksand, but work was solid. I knew, like, I was really good at my job. I was really good at my job. And no false modesty here. And I wanted to return to feeling successful in some aspect of my life, and the rest of my life was kind of failing. And I was also really bored. When you're on disability, you're not allowed to work or do anything that resembles your work because you can be charged with insurance fraud. I didn't want to deal with that on top of everything else. So I couldn't do a lot of the things I did for fun because there were also stuff that I would do for work. I was really like in a great position at work because they paid me to do fun stuff. So I rewatched Buffy. I rewatched all of The West Wing. I watched Angel for the first time. And I watched a lot of TV that I'm not going to admit to all of you. Or the internet, since this is being recorded. So what do? You go back. And that was a really bad idea. So it was way harder than I thought it would be. I was not ready to come back. And besides like digging myself out of a mountain of email, I was actually still in excruciating pain. Have you seen that like that pain scale from 1 to 10 with the faces? One's really happy and one's crying. I was so far off that scale, it was incomprehensible to me. I wanted to actively die every single day. And I went back to work, as you do. And it turns out when you're in that much pain, the majority of your brain is actually dedicated to processing the pain, to suppressing it, to making sure you don't expose it to other people. You want to, the first instinct is to hide it away. And I realize this isn't an accurate diagram of the brain, so please don't come up to me afterwards and complain about my lack of knowledge about biology, because I fully admit that. But why does it take so much energy? Well, let's unpack pain a little bit. Our society tends to equate pain with weakness. If only we tried hard enough, meditated enough, did enough yoga, maybe some hot yoga, we wouldn't be in pain, right? That's what we like to think, that we have agency over that. But despite that being like sometimes what you hear from doctors, it's generally not true. And other people hate the idea that they too could someday be in that situation without that control. So it's really common for people in pain to hide it away, put it in a box, bury it 10 feet beneath the ground, and then feel shame and isolation because of it. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what I'm going through. I tend to talk about that a lot, so because I do think that talking about things is the way we feel less alone. But this was 6 years ago, and I would literally hide from people because I knew if I spent too much time with them, the facade would just crumble. They'd know and they'd start avoiding me, which actually did happen with friends. I lost a fair number of friends because of that. The question I had, but that I didn't know to ask was, can I be in pain? And can it be okay that I'm in pain? And what I wanted to hear was yes. And we want to hear that it's okay to not hide the pain, to not hide the fact that, like, sometimes the shooting pain that you get from your nerves will make you literally gasp or fall or pass out in some cases. And the fact that we don't want to hide the fact that we may need some medication to control it. And that's what medication is for. So people talk about bringing your whole self to work, right? We hear that a lot in our industry. But people with chronic pain want to be able to bring their whole self to the world, just interacting as themselves. And we want to reclaim that energy that goes into hiding pain and use it for fun stuff, for other stuff. So as I was going back to work, I encountered other challenges because it wasn't okay at that point for me to bring my whole self. And that was made pretty clear when I returned. There were a lot of complications from the purely practical. I had no place to store ice packs, and that's what got me through the day. Were ice packs. I would literally numb my back so hard that, it hurt from the numbing instead of from my actual back, because the logical thing to do when you're in pain is to heap pain on top of it and drown it out, so at least it's pain you caused instead of pain you're suffering. Like, I kind of joking about that, but also kind of not. But I also couldn't do things like open doors on my own. Not like the huge, heavy security doors that I have to badge into, but like conference room doors. They had literally cut the muscles down my neck and down my spine. Like, there was no way I was going to be able to open doors until those healed. And they weren't healed at that point. So that was pretty rough, and I didn't want anybody to see that. I would wait until people had left the corridors before I would try opening a door. Or even better, kick people out of the conference room and they'd leave the door open for me. It was great. So I did feel like I had to hide that because I was worried about being judged. And I was. And there was no judgment as pointed as when you are in an elevator going from floor 3 to floor 4. I mean, we've all kind of been there. People thought because I looked okay, I actually didn't look much different when I was recovering from those surgeries as I do now, than I do now. But I was not the same person. I was somebody who'd gone through extreme trauma, both in the seeking of figuring out what's going on with me, to the surgeries themselves, to how I was treated afterwards. That was huge psychological and physical trauma. So it was real, and people expected me to be the same person I was before I left, same person on the upward career trajectory. And that just wasn't true, but they treated me that way because that's all they knew how to do, and because they didn't know how much pain was literally consuming my brain. So what could have gone differently? Like, in an alternate timeline, what could have gone differently in my experience? How do we make pain okay? Well, it begins with compassion. So I'm going to talk about 3 types of compassion that we can integrate into our lives. The first is self-compassion. And this is one of the hardest things to do, so I'm going to dedicate the least amount of time to it. It's especially, self-compassion is basically being nice to yourself. And it's really hard in tech because we kind of glorify publicizing your failures and minimizing your successes. We become our own harshest critic, even if we weren't beforehand, right? Some of us start that way. Some of us learn it. Exercising self-compassion when you're in pain is extremely hard because our internalized ableism is this voice that tells you that you don't deserve compassion because you're a drag. You're being dramatic. These are things that you hear both from the world and from your brain itself. But it's all the more necessary to exercise self-compassion because celebrating victories, even the small ones, is important. So I do recommend this book called Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. This was recommended by my therapist, and it's really practical. So if you're interested in being nicer to yourself, it's a good book. But even though the term is self-compassion, you can get help with it. It's okay to get help from your friends and have them tell you when you're being too hard on yourself. And that way you can start internalizing that voice of compassion. It starts outside in. Just depends how you work. So we've all got self-compassion nailed down, right? Okay, good, because we're moving on. We're going to go to workplace compassion, which is actually really hard as well. We value productivity over human connection, which is really weird. Working with people is what creates that productivity. Our colleagues are people, not robots, yet. Actually, I might be a robot. I failed a number of Turing tests, so jury's still out, but it would be great if I was, because then I could just replace parts. But we know that productive teams are ones who connect with each other on a level of shared humanity. And that shared humanity is really important. And it's really helpful for those of us who are disabled. Sure, I can engage with my manager and HR and benefits, to tell my team that I need documents well ahead of meetings so that I can listen to them instead of read them. But if I know that I can trust my team, if we've connected on that shared humanity level, then I can be open about my needs. And they, in turn, have the opportunity to feel trusted, which is an amazing gift to give people. We also need to make it so that not every day is going to be stellar. Some days, people with pain are going to have more or less. And it's okay to not have every day be the greatest. Don't encourage your employees or your colleagues to take sick time when they're dealing with something they have to deal with every single day. It might seem counterintuitive, but in some ways, to tell people, feel free to take a sick day or whatnot, however you want to phrase it, can actually make it seem not okay. Make their baseline state seem not okay. And you're telling them that it's unacceptable to be at work and be in pain. So if we rephrase the earlier question and turn it into a statement, I want it to be okay that I'm in pain. I never want it to be good. Like, it's not going to be a good thing, but that's not what I'm asking, or not what I'm saying. I would be pretty remiss to talk about workplace compassion without touching on the importance of communication. I like to think about communication skills in 3 stages. Stage 1 is saying what you want to say. Stage 2 is saying what you want to say in a way that makes your point. Stage 3 is saying what you want to say in a way that makes your point and that others can hear it. Oftentimes people stay at stage 2. It leads to folks talking past each other. And I know for me that led to not feeling heard or respected. And I was carrying that trauma with me about not being heard, not feeling like I was worth it. And, we like to think that we can separate these things, but it was at that point still very present for me. So make sure that when you're communicating in a way that it'll be heard and that the other person also feels heard. So save the hot takes for Twitter. They rarely lead to productive conversations. First to speak wins is not a valid decision-making strategy. Also shouting, that's not either. But it also actually means that you may lose the voices of people like me who need longer to process information. Or introverts. I'm an introvert as well. I take a little bit more time to speak because I want to make sure that that's what I want to do. Or you could just send them to DevNull. Twitter doesn't need the hot takes either. They've got enough on their hands. So finally, what about compassionate products? Can we build compassionate products? It requires yet another perspective shift. We generally build our products for the people, for who we think our users will be. 1 in 5 people will experience disability at some point in their life. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but so what you're doing is building for a percentage of the population, not everyone. and you leave people with disabilities out entirely. So if you consider your defaults again, think about how your products may actually cause harm in some of your users. So I'll echo Hadley from his talk yesterday about beware numbers. Beware the numbers. And that really resonated with me because we're in a time where we've turned our lives into this quantifiable target numbers that we have to hit, or else something horrible will happen. I'm not sure what. I have yet to find out. Or maybe I have, actually. And I'm not immune to this. I have a Fitbit. I'm not wearing it today. Because when I hurt myself, or like I did last night, or if I'm sick, I have to take it off because I will hit that target goal, or else, damn it. And that actually winds up harming me. And it probably harms people like me who are obsessed with achieving their goals. So we can build products that are compassionate themselves. Has anyone seen this Lego before? We've got one person, two people. So Lego actually recently created a kit to help children learn Braille with Lego. And it's perfect, right? Like, why didn't anybody think of that before? Actually, I'm pretty sure they did. But Lego productized it. I, for one, am learning Braille and would love a set of these. I know one letter. It's the letter L so far. But this is a really interesting take on a compassionate product. But it's very specific, so let's look at some others. How many people think that this is a compassionate product? Yeah, it's a shoehorn. It's a pretty neat piece of technology that helps people put on shoes. How about this one? This gets a lot of bad rap from folks who think that people who buy pre-sliced fruit or vegetables are being lazy. But it's great for people who have tremors, or people like me who have poor to no depth perception, or people who have arthritis in their hands. It's a really compassionate product. It gives people the ability to still eat well. Have you seen this one? How many of you think it's a compassionate product? These are all super leading questions, so it's not hard. So this one crossed my radar recently, and it took quite a bit of heat from people on Twitter. I was like, how lazy can you get, right? They wanted to say something cutting on the internet, as they often do. But for me, I love this idea. It would allow me to go places without checking out like what the environment is ahead of time, or having to ask for somebody's seat, or, doing something really uncomfortable for me, which is keeping a seat even when I look fine. So I think this is actually a really interesting product, and is full of compassion, actually. This one came to my attention Wednesday night. Have you seen this? Okay. Yeah, it's an attachment for your garbage can. And what it does is you tell it what day your garbage gets picked up, and it will roll itself out to the curb. I mean, this appeals to a lot of us, right? Just hands down. But these are the types of products that are amazing for people with disabilities. There are some days where I can take the can to the curb, but my energy is kind of zero-sum. And I want to spend less time on things that cause me more pain. And when you're forced to choose, I'd rather spend my time on enjoying my life than recovering from it. And that's what's great about our industry. We can deliver independence, we can enable joy, and we can literally build compassion. So thank you.